Hi, welcome back. Part two, Janice Carter. I'm going to start at her shared experiences for Ruby. I asked Ruby about the roles within her culture. Ruby said that in her community had already prescribed roles for her, where she comes from a culture where women's status was based upon their husband's accomplishments. She talked about how her new role as a widow was placed upon her within her community. She said that all she knew how to do was be a wife and a mother. So when her husband died, she said everything in their life that they had created together had died. And she felt hopeless and lost. Ruby said that she had to find another purpose for her life because she was still alive and evidently God still had a plan for her. Erickson notes that integrity can be retained when there is a balance of accepting life accomplishments and disappointments by understanding that there is a greater human narrative that is filled with compassion. Hearn et al. 2011. When we discussed about her health, Ruby said she never went to the doctor and neither did her parents because they couldn't afford to go to. They couldn't afford to go. She said her father died of cancer, ignoring his pain that he was experiencing, and her mother's only medication was a baby aspirin. And when she died, she lied on her bed and went to sleep. And so this microsystem of Ruby's immediate family of taking care of their health, it shaped how she felt about taking care of her health, that everything was going to be all right, and ignored symptoms that she shouldn't have ignored. And Ruby and so she did not take the self-managing her health and well-being, especially in her old age. And she added that she wanted to die like her mother, peacefully in her sleep. When we talked about why she dropped out of high school, Ruby talked about when she moved to New Jersey from Florida, how she first time went to school with students that were a different ethnic group and a higher socioeconomic status, and she felt out of place. So she dropped out and got married. Hearns and colleagues, 2011, note that when an older person reflects on their life, they will engage in the process of pseudo-integration and resolve their feelings of failure by ignoring the unacceptable life choices they made. They would then reconstruct their failure to be viewed in a more acceptable image, and by doing so, they can maintain their sense of integrity. When we talked about her oppressed experiences, um, Ruby, I asked her why the only option was for her to move out of her home, her parents' home, was to get married. And she laughed and she told her mom when she was 9 years old, because that's all she knew, and she was going to get married and have children. So this shaped how Ruby thought about who she was. And she said most of the women that she knew, all the girls her age, that was their goal, to get married and have children. And so when she became a widow, she had to change her role, and that what caused her depression, along with losing her husband. And Ruby would have benefited from therapy that would have allowed her to create a new life narrative for her life and her new role as a widow. And as Erickson asserts, that an older person can maintain their integrity when they produce a positive evaluation about their life, the less regrets they will have. That's some good case in love, 2017. Ruby would have been able to maintain her integrity by looking forward to the future and using her prior homemaking skills to help young mothers and members of her church, which was very important to her. We talked again about her health and reason why she did not go to the doctor as she should. And she said that people in her community didn't go to the doctors. And really back then, there was only a few doctors that would see people from her community. So there was no preventive care. she did not see the lack of education, the lack of health care as an oppressed undertaking in her community, because she said that's just the way things were back then. And then when we talked about her education, Ruby talked about how she felt like she would have never been accepted by those kids, even the ones of her same ethnic group. So she dropped out. And back in the 1960s, race relations in public schools were very high because of desegregation. And Erickson notes that a person will experience despair when they don't see themselves within the environment that they live in. There's no room for them. They won't fit there. Through the multi-system lens, thinking about Ruby, she never got a chance to invest in herself. It was always about her family and others. She noted that there was a time that she wanted to run off and be by herself, and she would have been the talk of the town. But when I look at Ruby's life through the micro system family setting, how she was able to readjust her role as a secondary caretaker for her grandchildren after the death of her husband. And instilling this care and wisdom to her grandchildren, Ruby says, give her peace about the pending end of her life. Again, when we talked about her health, and through her microsystem of her parents are not going to the doctor as they should, and Ruby mentioned about the members of her community didn't go to the doctors like they should. She talked about how the babies in her community were born at home. They didn't go to the hospital. And when it came to childhood immunizations, they were all done in school. Then I asked her about her education, how differently she think her life would have been. She said that if she had pursued her career, the death of her husband would not have been so devastating, because everything she knew involved him. She didn't start regret not finishing high school until she started having children. And she said, and there was so many factory jobs that did not require an education that it wasn't important. And she said it was a step up from working on the farms. When applying Ruby's life to Levinson's theory, an additional theory, um, talking about Ruby late adulthood, she was experiencing a time of transition, as Levinson notes. Levinson asserts that with a combination of our environment, we develop life structures and behavior patterns. He further says that as we go through these life structures, such as events, people, culture, religion, etc., we adjust to what's important to us. That's from Rogers, 2016. When applying this theory to Ruby's experience in roles such as marriage, parenting, church membership, community involvement, she reflects that she followed the same behavior pattern as her mother. She said that she sees it as stepping stones of her mama's life journey. She noted that her mother's life was filled with joy and peace, and that she wanted the same to be said for her life when she passes away. The most important aspect of Ruby's life was caring for her family, and she was able to redefine her role as caretaker for her grandchildren. Rogers noted that grandparents can obtain a sense of accomplishment when they are actively involved with their grandchildren, which gave Ruby a new purpose. 2016. Ruby said that her grandchildren gives her a reason to be excited again about the holidays. And now living in her daughter's house, she has become the patriarchal rank in her immediate family. The limitations of Levinson's theory is that the study was predominantly about men, whose focus was about career achievement and who were of a high socioeconomic status. Ruby believes that people in their old age, and they achieved on career, and where women was more concerned about the others. And Ruby felt like people in their old age should have something good to say about them. She says it's not about money, houses, and land. It's about what she can maintain, the values and beliefs that helped in her grandchildren, that helped her throughout her lifetime. And thank you very much for listening to my presentation.